Welcome back to Guitar Wisdom. In this series, we're talking about the CAGED system for understanding the guitar. And in part one, we talked about using the 5 chord shapes C, A, G, E, and D to play in 5 different positions, moving up the neck, all the same chords, so that you can spot where each position is going to live. Now we're going to translate that into chord shapes. Scale shapes. Very important, because this is how you're going to be able to play fluidly up and down the neck, all different kinds of things, using that sort of effortless, seamless approach that you see a great player using on the guitar. And if you've ever seen a player like this and wondered, how does he know how to do that all up and down the neck? It doesn't seem to be confined by a position. Well, trust me, there is an understanding of position playing that underlies all that. And in my opinion, as I discussed a little bit in video 1, the CAGED system is the best, most efficient, most elegant approach to this. So now that we know how to do this placement of each of these positions moving up the neck, we're going to talk about laying a scale pattern over the top. One of the things you'll notice at first is that the scale patterns don't line up perfectly with the chord shapes. So they're not perfectly analogous in every case to the exact fingering of the chord shapes, but they're pretty darn close, and it's enough that the chord shapes give you a nice reference. And that reference, I can't emphasize enough, is very important. That chord reference is the way that the guitar is going to be emerging from the fog of lacking understanding about how it's put together. It's a complicated instrument. Nobody is going to claim that the guitar is a simple instrument to figure out. Compared to the interface of other instruments, it's actually quite complicated. So give yourself a break. It's not just you. Everybody has trouble understanding how this thing works. And that's why I want to put so much emphasis on this system as really being a great solution to figuring the whole thing out. So we talked about using the C, A, G, E, and D forms in the key of G to play in 5 different positions. And let's just recap that real quick. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, go back to part 1 and check this out. But I'll just show them to you really quickly here. I've got an E form, I've got a D form, a C form, an A form, and a G form. I've played them such that they were all G chords. So if I put a scale form over the top of where every one of these chords was, I'm going to be able to play the G scale in 5 different places on the neck, and it will pretty much blanket the neck. A little bit of overlap. In a couple of cases, there's going to be a gap of maybe a fret, but it does a good job of covering the entire neck. So let's talk about how we do it. With the G form chord, we had a first finger bar across the 3rd fret, which is where the root was on the 6th string. Now we're going to change that to being a 2nd finger, and this scale is confined completely to 2nd position. In other words, the fingers are each going to stay on a fret. They're going to live right on the fret that you see me placing my fingers on here. And so the 2nd finger is going to play the root. And there's the E form scale. Very common, very useful. It's an easy fingering. There's nothing difficult about it. Now, when I go to the D form, which is the next one up the neck, I told you that we want to know where this 4th string root is. Now, the D form chord was up here, but this is kind of the quirky one. The D form is quirky in a lot of ways because the form is less associated to the scale, and the chord's not terribly useful, but it's still important to kind of understand where this is. When you go to the associated scale here, we're not so concerned about this area up here. We're still interested in where that 3rd fret G was on the 6th string, although now we're going to really concentrate on playing this next area of the neck a little bit higher. And if we really were being completely technical here, we would call this a 4th position scale, because these 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers are going to remain firmly attached to the 5th, 6th, and 7th fret. And the first finger is going to do some stretching here. So we're going to stretch to get the 3rd fret notes, and that's why technically this really is a 4th position scale. So our first finger hits that root now, and we have to stretch again on the 5th string. So there's some first finger stretches involved in this one, and you're going to see some 4th finger stretches involved in some of the other scales, but you'll never see both at once. You'll get a first finger stretch or you'll get a 4th finger stretch. So quick recap, E form. Based off this root here on the 6th string. Still based off on this 6th string root is the D form. However, centered just a bit higher up the neck. When we move to the C form, if you recall, that C form chord here used this 5th string root with the 4th finger. Now we'll keep almost this exact shape here when we start playing the scale. This is a 7th position scale, and there are no stretches involved in the C form. We're going to begin here with the root, even though it's not the lowest note. We'll talk about that in a second. What I usually do when I'm playing a scale that has a lot of notes below the root is start with the root, play up like I just did, play back down until I get to the root, and then I'll go down below the root and finish on the root. If you start this scale somewhere other than the root, just because those notes are available in the position, it doesn't sound like a G scale anymore. It sounds like something else. And when we're playing the G scale, we probably want it to sound like a G scale. So I recommend making sure that you start it on the root, play up it, play down it, go ahead and play to the bottom, but finish back on the root. All right, when we went to the A form, the 4th pattern here, we're still working off that 5th string root, but now we're moving slightly higher up on the neck. It doesn't exactly overlay this chord fingering here. We're going to put a 2nd finger on the root now. We're going to get a stretch in this one. The A form. Another really common, really useful scale. It's a pretty easy fingering. All right, finally, the G form is up here in 12th position. We're going to get a 4th finger stretch in this one. And the 4th finger plays the root just like in the chord. There's the stretch. And if we wanted to, we could repeat the E form that we started on here with the 2nd finger on the 6th string, because that 6th string G comes back at the octave here, 12 frets above where we started. So we could come full circle and play the E form again at the top. And of course, you can keep going, follow the same pattern until you run out of frets. All right, so hopefully you understand why this is useful. Now, just because I showed it to you here, and conceptually this might make a lot of sense, you might grasp it, does not mean that all of these secrets are unlocked and it's fully available to you and you're just going to go tearing out of the gate and understand this immediately. The patterns are relatively simple. You'll memorize them soon, but using them across a lot of keys takes a lot of absorption. It takes a lot of repetitive practice to really be able to say that you've mastered the 5-position system and you can use it capably. Typical scenario is you're in an improvisational situation on a tune you don't know. Maybe you've got some of the ear training chops to be able to say, oh, this is the key of do-do-do-do-do, and or maybe you don't. Maybe somebody's just saying to you, hey, we're going to play in the key B flat. And you're going to try to play something coherent as an improvisation over the top of this, well, you could imagine, especially if you've struggled to make this work in the past, why this is going to be so useful, because you'll be able to say, well, I'm not just confined to the one or two scales that I maybe used to use. I now have the fluidity to move up and down the neck. And even though you might want to try to kind of make some excuses and say, no, well, I'm still going to be confined and I don't want to be locked into those positions and doing everything in a box, trust me, you won't be. It's just a framework for you to understand how to do things later. If you want to kind of mesh these fingerings together later, that's fine. There's no problem with, kind of merging one position to the next. It's very common to slide in between them, especially when you're talking about pentatonics. You'll be sliding in between them all over the place. It's just a framework, although in order to learn the framework, you really need to practice it the way I just showed it to you, in positions with the exact fingerings that I gave you, despite the fact that you might want to change them later in a given scenario. Learn them the way that I showed them to you just now. And you can go to my website. You can look at the downloadable sheets where I've got these all diagrammed out for you. That's at danmalott.com/guitarwisdom. And just take my word for it. Practice them the way they're given here. Later on, when they're just second nature to you, you can smear them together all you want. You could forget you ever knew them, but they'll still inform your playing in a really useful way. Later installments of this series, we're going to talk about how to get pentatonics out of this, which you need to know how to do, and is incredibly useful. After that, we'll probably start talking about some ways that you can use this for your practice. So make sure you subscribe, give us a like, find us, like I said, on my website, danmalott.com. There's an entire section for Guitar Wisdom. You can listen to some of my tunes there. There's a Facebook page somewhere out there for Guitar Wisdom, probably. So find it, like it, stay tuned. There's more like this coming. Thanks very much for watching.